Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Alt Egos. As always, I'm your host, Glenn, and with me this week is Joey. How's it going this week?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm going great, going great. It's just another week with Marvel Champions, and this week I thought it would be great if we just talked about power level and balance in a cooperative game and what that means for Marvel Champions. So let's get straight into it. So, Joey, recently there's been probably 2 months of discussion, I feel, about Doctor Strange and what he brings to the game and his unique, sort of power level and how he's engaging with the currently released scenarios. And we've seen that a lot of discussion and backlash from that has resulted in a lot of vocal players expressing some of their discontent with how strong he feels and how strong he plays, and particularly in comparison with some of the other heroes that have been presented to us in the game. And I just guess before we get too much further into it, I guess I just wanted to have your impression of how you feel the power level is in Marvel Champions at the moment, and what you think about the situation with Doctor Strange to start with.
Yep. So we know that the designers are aiming for a feeling of empowerment as part of their game mechanics, which makes sense as a superhero game. If you were feeling really weak while playing superheroes, you probably wouldn't really be feeling the superhero theme. It's not really part of the storylines. The characters feel strong. It just feels like they're taking on things that are stronger. Not most of the time in comics at least, and most of the movies. Um, and because of that, I feel like that most of the time, they're the cards that are being designed are going to they're either coming from another game and feeling too weak, or they're coming from another game or they're coming from a design from a superhero standpoint, and they're probably too strong. Like, it won't be hard and fast. That's always the case type thing. But I would, if I was to generalize, I would think that's probably where the designers find that where things I would expect that would be where things would shake out most of the time. And because of that, the balance for this game is just going to be difficult. Um, your most co-op games, you are meant to feel insignificant. It's why Arkham Horror works so well, and even a bit for Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings, it's not completely about insignificance, but like there's a sub theme going on there. But the Arkham in particular, the the Lovecraft mythos is just that's like one of their main themes, is how insignificant individual people, or even whole the whole human race is. Um, and because we're a complete departure from that, where it's always going to be difficult to balance, because you need the characters to feel strong, and uh, some of them feel is strong sometimes, but not always. Some of them, some of them like need cards to come out in a particular order. Like if you play Iron Man and the bottom 7 cards are all your tech, a Spider-Man, and Spider-Man generally is always going to feel relatively powerful because I think he's fairly well. He's got a pretty good curve on that. But then, in the case of Doctor Strange always having access to his most powerful cards, because honestly, his hero set is like, if it was just his hero set, we wouldn't be talking about this right now. Um, his hero set is not that powerful realistically, but that one card on the table that's his strongest card, and he always has access to one of his strongest cards, which is a big thing. But I don't overall. I don't feel that Doctor Strange is that much more powerful than, say, Captain America. But Captain America is another outlier with power. But because of this game being a co-op game, there's always the option to not play those characters. There's always the option to, so we can choose. You can decide not to play those characters. You can. You also may want them down the line when there's a scenario that's too difficult. We don't really have a incredibly difficult scenario currently. Mutagen formula is is definitely achievable with every character in at least one aspect, if not all. There are some particular combinations I feel like it might still be quite difficult with, but on expert mutagen formula, you can beat it with every character. I have done it. I'm pretty sure. So and that's the hardest scenario we have currently. But down the line, who knows? Let's say a Thanos scenario comes out a year or two from now, or even just the next deluxe box after the Red Skull, and that's just game-breaking, incredibly ludicrous, and no one can beat it. You might want to try Doctor Strange or Captain America into that because it gives you an option, and it gives you an option to learn the game because of that, because of their power. And Doctor Strange probably isn't the best for learning the game because there's a lot of moving parts. But as an intermediate player, maybe you don't know the scenarios. I think that'd be a good. That could be a good spot for it. Good spot for his existence as cards.
Yeah, I think you touched on quite a few good points there. For me, I think the particular thing that I always come back to is like he's still fun to play, and like all the heroes they've released so far, for me personally, they've been fun to play, and so like I think design is succeeding at the very very minimum that each hero feels unique and they each provide something different to the table. I guess for me in cooperative games, what becomes not fun is if you know the outcome of the scenario before you start. Like if there's very minimal risk to a negative outcome while playing, then there's no tension in that experience that you're trying to have while playing. And I think unfortunately, with the small pool of scenarios that we have accessible to us at the moment, Doctor Strange falls into that category where the tension is lost from the scenario just because of how he interacts with the scenarios currently released. But I completely agree with you that as the game matures and as more and more scenarios come out, I'm not always confident that Doctor Strange will be able to as aptly address the challenges of the scenario as they come out. So
yeah, I also don't fully agree that Doctor Strange guarantees you a particular outcome, because I view him more like Iron Man, where those first few turns are when it's going to mess up, although Doctor Strange is stronger in those first few turns than Iron Man is. But it does get into that state after a little bit. Probably your first, maybe your second deck pass at worst, similar to Iron Man. You probably have a decent idea if you're going to win that game. You probably know if you're going to win that game or not at that point.
Yeah, I think maybe in solo play, but I think in multiplayer it almost becomes a given fairly early on.
Like Iron Man.
Yeah, I think Iron Man still puts pressure because he can't flip turn one, regardless. Like it's almost impossible for him to flip turn one and have a decent chance, though it does happen occasionally. I think for me, the concern I have with Strange, and it will probably remain throughout the game's lifetime, is that he's very close to breaking a lot of the core efficiency rules, I would say, of the game. And he's very close to getting around a lot of the disruptive tactics that a scenario will throw at a player. And in that way, he feels a little bit like Rex from Arkham Horror, which is a investigator that my group played once, and then we just set him aside, and I don't think we've ever played him again, just because for us and what our group wanted from the experience, he was reducing the tension to a point that we just weren't enjoying what was happening at the table. I think
Rex was the seeker who just got like all the clues ever.
yeah. He basically
I-
just outpaced the game mechanics that were present in the campaign that he was a part of. But with Doctor Strange, I think he kind of appeals to a different sort of player, right? Like he can be really fun to play, and if you're less experienced with the game, like in a way, that's a net positive because you have a positive experience with the game, even if maybe you don't fully understand why, or you're just wanting to beat up one of the many villains that are in the game. My one concern from a cooperative standpoint is always that if one hero is too good and the rest of the table isn't as good, it can really ruin the game balance where like you just feel like one hero, is doing 70 to 80% of the work, but you haven't agreed that that's the mechanic that you're trying to work towards in a game. But I don't think Doctor Strange does that. I think rather he actually has a lot of cooperative elements. Like he can give the tough tokens out to other players. He can buff other players for +1 for a turn. I think he engages quite well in a multiplayer perspective. And the balance isn't as concerning because I think it's too early on to make those sort of claims because we just don't know where Rise of Red Skull sits on the difficulty scale. That would be my take. I don't know how you feel about that, but I just think it's too early to feel like he's going to be a long-term problem. And like you said, he's not that far above Captain America, I feel.
Yeah, he's the big thing to consider though is while I don't think he's that far above Captain America, and I didn't when Captain America came out, I didn't feel like he was that far above Iron Man, which was I think that we got some of these same conversations in the core set. Um, the the balance, particularly if it comes to one of the characters, because we also need to remember that these characters aren't just they're not in a vacuum. These characters have fans. Like for instance, I am a big fan of Doctor Strange in the comics, um, and because of that, some people may have felt that it wasn't right if Doctor Strange wasn't incredibly powerful, because Doctor Strange in the Marvel Universe is normally used as he's normally the fix for whatever hole the writers written themselves into when he turns up in someone else's comic. In his own comic, he's normally a bit of an underdog because he's taking on things that are just well and truly more powerful than anyone should have to take on. But the yeah, him feeling powerful could be viewed by some people to be um, uh, to feel right for that character. I as a Doctor Strange fan, I'm not the biggest fan of the Doctor Strange hero set, because partially I believe I went into this during our Doctor Strange episode, but it's mostly just I don't feel like the Strange has lived up to that much, but um, it's also partially because I'm not going to be able to play him and against every scenario with a group of people because he's viewed as quite a bit more powerful. So if I'm ever in a group, I will, or might want to pick someone else so that it's not, as you mentioned before, detracting from other people's experience. But because it feels like I'm doing more than what they could.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he does that though. I guess that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know if he really is pulling the weight of like 2 or 3 other players. I think he just augments the table in such a way that the scenarios currently can't really get a leg up on the players as much.
Yeah. I don't think he gets to 2 upgrade, but I think he probably gets to like 1.5. Um, maybe like so um you're not completely taking over the table, but I think you are a little bit, particularly if someone is keeping track of the implicit, like what you've done to the table overall, rather than what you actually did. So, like if you give someone magical enhancements, if they count that, it depends if someone's in their head counts that as Doctor Strange doing 1 more damage or Captain America doing a damage,
Yeah.
because he's the one that was given it. Um, and that would legitimately just come down to the person. Um, who knows what an individual person would judge that as, particularly if they're not really thinking about it. It's just like subconscious in the back, like in their back of the head calculation type thing.
Yeah.
Um, in we can't really say how that would affect someone's experience.
Yeah, I think it's interesting though that you point out that maybe there are like gaming groups where if you did show up with strange, like it feels a bit odd that there may be this sense that, oh, you're playing with strange. Like, could you play someone else? Like, I don't know how prevalent that would be, but I definitely know that the opposite occurs sometimes where people go like, I'm playing She-Hulk. And people go like, what are you doing? You're like, no, no, no,
Yeah,
trust me, trust
it's
me.
happened to me a few times.
So yeah, it's interesting how different people respond, and um, I guess like at the end of the day, you just kind of I think there are ways to have fun in because it's co-op. Like it is totally fine to throw it in or take it out, and it's really more like it's what as a group people want to engage with. And I hope that like people banning it are only doing so if it's an agreed arrangement rather than like stopping someone from having their fun. Because like I said initially, like every hero that's come out is fun to play. Like doing what Doctor Strange does is fun to play, and playing as Thor is fun. It's just that, like you said, if someone can, obviously see that they're doing 1.5 to two heroes worth of stuff, on their turn, time in, time out, you can feel a bit left behind or not as engaged because you're playing, Thor or you're playing Black Panther, but you're not doing as much to the table, and it can feel like you're not the hero that you thought you were, which is a bit sad. And I think that's why I think you could pilot Strange in such a way where you can more just augment other players' experience while still contributing, rather than going for like the power gamer thing, which you can obviously do too. And we've seen that. I think Hall of Heroes built a leadership deck that I gave a whirl, and it definitely felt like the training wheels were on, playing into some of the more challenging combinations of scenario. So I can see the concern, and I think time will tell, and we'll have to wait and see what the Rise of Red Skull has to bring in, even Kang maybe. But I think we're just thankful that it's a co-op game, because if this was a competitive game, like obviously it's a very different conversation we'd be having with regards to if there was such a deck or card that existed.
Yeah, the only uh, the first cycle of Warhammer Invasion, which was a competitive game, had one faction get a few power cards, I believe, in the first cycle, and it just threw out everything. And that's effectively where we're at the moment. We're still in the first cycle, and we've now got we've got 1 or 2 characters that are just uh, quite a bit stronger than anything else from the core set. Those would be mainstays forever in a competitive game. Andromeda from Netrunner was released in the first cycle as well, and she was the face of the criminal faction for literally years before she was rotated out.
Yeah, I guess that is
Um,
true. And then you're also providing new heroes with signature sets that you can't otherwise access. So like there is incentive to switch heroes a bit more frequently in this game. Like that's a really good point because it's not really a mainstay when you can't like take advantage of the other 15 cards that you're missing out on with a new hero pack.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I guess out of that discussion, uh, do you think some of the feedback is coming more from the I guess lack of advancement in scenario difficulty, or do you think it really is coming back to Doctor Strange as a hero? Um, I don't know if you tried his precon, but I was thinking about it, and I think his precon kind of does put him in a like a better spot. Like if you played his precon into standard, it's reasonably strong, and if piloted correctly, is still obviously above curve, but it doesn't feel as disruptive to the table as a custom deck. And so I wonder if that's part of the thinking behind him is that in the pre-con sort of conditions and with the scenarios available, he functions a little bit less dramatically than in the custom decks that we're seeing from players.
I think the only precon I've played is the Captain Marvel one from the core set. So I didn't touch the precon at all. But I don't really see the precons having that much of an effect on overall discussion about any character in general. But it could be having an impact. I don't know how likely someone who focuses on precon play would be to engage with the online community, because generally it's the more hardcore fans that are on the social medias and the internet talking about these things rather than the more casual fans who have picked up and are playing the precon
Yeah.
constantly.
Yeah.
Obviously,
That's very true.
the people, not everyone's like me and just skips the precon entirely. Um, People definitely try them, and I'm sure people felt the difference between the Doctor Strange precon and the Thor precon. Um, but even the Black Widow precon was pretty good as well. Um, so it's from what I've heard. So I think it's more at this point. I think it's more Doctor Strange. I think if we then the scenario stuff, it's being compounded by the relatively easy scenarios we have at the moment. But the Doctor Strange being at the power level he is before that we get a more difficult scenario to justify his existence, um, is uh, is definitely a factor. But I think just his power level, and because we did see a discussion similar to this with Captain America when Captain America came out, but back then we still had the Wrecking Crew coming out down the line, and now and we just got in Green Goblin at the time, which people were struggling with. It made sense for a powerful character to come out at this point to help people that were struggling. But we're not struggling, most of us, if we've been playing regularly since the game came out. We're not struggling anymore. People have tips. People have whole podcast episodes on helping out how to fight particular scenarios. And uh, Doctor Strange has come out in the towards the end of that, realistically, and he's he's become the focal point for the uh, he's become the focal point for the discussion regarding difficulty and power level. Um, which, if we'd had, say, Thor come out, we'd probably still be having this conversation. It would just be, I think it would be viewed differently. Would be talking about different terms and whatnot. Like if we swapped like Doctor Strange and Thor's release schedule, I think we'd still be having this conversation. It would just be in a different light, because he'd still be out. He'd still be at the power level he is. It would just he would have come out closer to when we were actually having difficulty with the game, rather than now when the games are where most people have gotten the hang of it. Most people that are regularly playing have got the hang of it, I should say.
Yeah. I guess it sounds a bit silly, but one of the thoughts I had was it's a bit of a shame that he had the Avenger trait printed on him, because you couldn't really differentiate some aspect cards to keep him sort of separate if you wanted to push that sort of element. But the one thing about Thor, not that I think Thor's actually in a bad spot, but one thing I thought about Thor is that, like, in the future, if they wanted, Asgard could obviously get a bit more support, and maybe that helps kind of refine what Thor's potential is. That would help differentiate him from Doctor Strange.
Yeah, because it would be, at the moment, it's very similar to, what's the name of that card? It's not Master of the Mystic Arts. It's Mystical Studies.
Yes.
It's very similar to For Asgard at the moment. There's only 2 cards that he can grab that aren't in his hero set, being Heimdall and Yanbon.
Yeah. Yeah, and Mystical Studies, is that the one that does that pull a spell, or is that a Doctor Strange card? I can't remember.
Doctor Strange, pulls a hero card.
Right, but the Mysterium shuffles a spell back into his deck. Is that correct?
Yeah, the Sanctum Sanctorum.
Yeah.
Shuffles a spell back from his discard pile and then draws you a card.
Yeah. So yeah, they both have some future potential, I guess, but I think there are still some levers the designers can pull to really kind of, I guess, narrow the difference. But again, in a co-op game, I think this discussion ultimately isn't the end of the world, because you can always just not play him and have a really great time, or you can play him with the understanding that you might want to go up to heroic or expert, depending on what your group's play level is at. And I think that's the beauty of the game in general, is that the modularity of the scenarios should really, hopefully over time, adapt for this sort of situation, where maybe you're playing with the 4 strongest heroes, whatever they may be, but you can tailor a scenario to counteract that and still create a really fun experience. Because at the core of it, the mechanics within each hero create a really engaging time. Yeah. Did you have anything else to add on the balance discussion?
The only thing I would like to add is I know there are groups out there that ban, say, Doctor Strange, maybe even Captain America, because of their power levels. You might because of the existence of those, I'm sure there are some that are banning weaker characters they perceive as weaker, like She-Hulk and Thor. I would just like to, if any of the listeners are considering something like that in their group sessions, just be careful with that, because it's stronger characters being banned is always going to is always going to push your difficulty up a little bit. It's not going to be that it's not going to have that much of an effect on the game, but having a weaker character, if you're constantly banning a weaker character, you might miss something down. You might miss when the designer pulls the lever and makes something that makes those characters stronger. Like it could be it could be something. It like, so you mentioned the Asgard trait. That could be used to make Thor a little bit stronger, but it could also be something like most of the characters that I generally hear people referring to on the weaker scale have higher attack values, and it could be something like Counterpunch. We already have Counterpunch, and it's not boosting them that much. But if you get some card down the line with some similar effect, all of a sudden those higher attack value characters might actually start pushing them up into the next level tiers, and then you have to reevaluate characters and um, just be careful if you are cutting down on what characters you want to use. Stronger ones are generally better to remove than weaker ones, because weaker ones could always get stronger, whereas stronger ones are never going to get weaker. They'll get weaker relatively, but they'll never get weaker. They'll never absolutely lose power, because you'll always have that. You will always be able to play that same deck you were always playing.
Yeah, and I think it's for particular sets of groups, because I think different players and different groups have a different experience with this game, and so I don't think everyone has the need to be banning heroes either way. I think it's just having fun with the group that you have, and if you feel things are a little bit unbalanced, to have that discussion as a group is always a good thing. Not make individual decisions. And hopefully with the release of new content starting up next month with Hulk and then Rise of Red Skull, we'll be able to have a lot more creative deck building, a few more challenging scenarios, and hopefully some really nasty modular sets to give some of the old scenarios a refresh after 6 months. So there's a lot to look forward to in the future. And I think the game is in a really engaging space, and it's going to be really positive once we start getting regular releases again, is all I'll say. So I'm looking forward to what the next few months have to hold. Don't know about you.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward, particularly the Hulk pack to start with. And yeah, we'll see what the future holds. I'm also kind of looking forward to. I assume there'll be an announcement early next month for the next hero.
Yeah, I guess we could end this by talking about how either before or after this comes out, there will have been a Gen Con in-flight report and some unannounced products, which may or may not be Marvel Champions related, but I think there's at least some discussion of upcoming products somewhere in their schedule. So check out Fantasy Flight Games Facebook group for the full schedule. And if it happens after this comes out, before this comes out, then hopefully you enjoyed all that, and we'll have an episode very soon to discuss all the content from there. So thank you everyone for listening, and until next time, have a great night.